my last question, Shannon Sharpe. A lot of people, they comparing you to Shannon Sharpe. I also want to ask you, what do you think about his approach on these serious situations that's plaguing us right now with all lives, black lives, all of that, and just comparing you to him?
Shannon Sharpe is a Hall of Fame tight end, one of the greatest football players to have ever played the game, an intelligent brother, a good brother who is my friend. He is not me, and I am not him. Just like I wasn't a tight end playing football in the National Football League, he hasn't been a journalist in newspaper, radio, and television for the past 24 years. He got his style, his flavor, I got mine. I wish him nothing but the best, but I'm focused on doing me.
I hear you.
And do you think at the ESPYs we had Carmelo Anthony, LeBron James, Chris Paul standing side by side? I believe they got a standing ovation at the ESPY Awards. Do you think the basketball, because they're our most visible, no helmets, they play indoors, so people of all colors go out and see them. Do you think the NBA would have took Colin Kaepernick and, more importantly, our overall mission statement to the next level?
Not Colin Kaepernick. You ain't large enough to make that kind of difference with the NBA. But if it were LeBron,
that's what I'm saying.
if it were Kevin Durant or somebody, it would have been different. But also understand something. Colin Kaepernick took a knee and he brought attention to racial injustices that have been taking place in our nation. He forced you to take a side, which made it more courageous. But at the same time, from a pragmatic perspective, what exactly did it accomplish? We still don't know. Whereas in the case of LeBron James, along with Dwayne Wade and CP3 and Melo, not just by introducing the ESPYs, but by the commercials that they're making, along the lines of being in the midst of a multi-billion-dollar negotiation with the National Basketball Association as we speak. Understand that they're trying to promote change in the right way, because what they did was provoke the involvement of the NBA. So now the NBA is working in concert with the NBA players. They're making commercials. And if they go a step further, and I hope that they will, and they decide to throw a portion, even if it's just 1% of their collective bargaining agreement, into the communities. Now we're talking about after-school programs. We're talking about recreational facilities. We're talking about things being put up where youngsters, our younger generation, have something to do after school rather than run the streets while their parents are out there hustling or whatever. So while we're sitting there saying, well, these brothers ain't Colin Kaepernick, they should have done this and they should have done that. Once again, we got to look at the forest from the trees and understand if we're doing things that are relatively beneficial. If you just talking and you want to march and you want to protest and you want to argue and you want to vent, that's fine. And it has its own level of effectiveness, but nothing compared to if you start putting monies where mouths are and creating change by building facilities and recreational facilities and after-school programs and things of that nature, where you're giving youngsters opportunities and alternatives. You're exposing them to different things. What if an NBA owner, for example, mandated that in his city, the coach and the players have to go into the community once a month? We're going to build this park. We're going to build this recreational facility. And by the way, it's incumbent upon you as a coach, as a player personnel director, as a scout, as a player, you have to visit that place at least once a month. Imagine if every NBA city, all 30 teams, did that in their respective city. Imagine if the NFL joined in, made the same decision for all 32 of their teams. Think about what if Major League Baseball jumped on the bandwagon, because they do have their RBI program, the Reviving Baseball in the City program. And what if they did that? All of a sudden, you have a collection of leagues that join forces. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars poured into the local economy. And all of a sudden, you ain't venting no more. You ain't kneeling no more, but what you did was facilitate getting things done. That's the way that we should be thinking. We should have a greater vision and a bigger vision, because you're talking about the owners getting involved. And why is that so important? Because the players can't make politicians act. They can give a voice to something, but it ain't gonna make politicians act. But when you're the owner, and you're responsible for a franchise that's generating and funneling millions of dollars to the local economy, If you got a problem with a local politician, they got to stand up at attention and listen, because you can take your business elsewhere, and it can drastically and detrimentally affect the local economy, and that forces them to listen. So it's not just about the players speaking up, it's about the players speaking up in a fashion that provokes the owners to get involved and use their considerable influence to affect politicians who make decisions that directly and drastically influence our lives. That is how you handle problems, because in the end, if we harken back to the civil rights movement, keep in mind, that's why they did it. They didn't do it just to give a voice to something. They did it to force politicians to act, to turn transgressions and iniquities into laws that would benefit and favor us and eliminate those iniquities that were exacted against us as communities. They didn't want to just march and speak and vent. They wanted folks to act, and they forced the government to do so. The sports leagues, not just the players, the leagues themselves, led by the owners and the commissioners, are in more of a position than anyone in history to make the kind of change we've been dying for decades, if not centuries.
Shannon Sharpe, he said if we really want to make change, we need a white athlete to take a stand. You agree with that?
Aaron Rodgers. You see, he used Aaron Rodgers, right? Did he?
Yeah. Well, he said that to Skip Bayless a
Yeah.
lot of times.
It would be nice, but I'm not sure you need it. I'd like to have it, but you don't need it. One of the things that we have to respect is this: white folks ain't black. Yeah, you can sit up there and not, perform acts of hatred, prejudice, racism, violence, whatever, against different segments of our populace. And it would help to be sensitive and remember that during the civil rights era, we would have never propelled ourselves to the heights that we propelled ourselves with if it were not for the assistance of white folks, some conscientious white folks along the way. But in order to provoke and spark them to do that, we have to be careful about crying about racism every chance we get. Because when we mention the word racism and we're looking at white people, they're thinking we're talking about all of them, not that we're talking about some of them. So we got to make sure that we highlight intelligently, look, we're talking about some and the way you act, not all.
Or just the ones that's committing the crimes and getting away with it
That's
as
what
well.
I'm saying. You're talking about that. We got to make sure we do better, because if you bark into somebody's face and telling them they ain't shit, how incentivized do you think that's going to make them to help you? It's just common sense sometimes. It's just the way it is. And now people will look at me and they'll say, well, who the hell is he to say something like that? Well, our very own president was talking about Black Lives Matter, acknowledged that he supported them, but also encouraged them to listen. And don't just protest everywhere. You got to a point where you saw them protesting the Republican candidates and the Democratic candidates. Well, here was the problem. Ain't one of them gonna be president. So don't you need to take a side? Because you're gonna need somebody. If you alienate both, where's that gonna get you? It's just a question. It's the kind of thing that we have to be mindful of. Because a lot of times I support causes, but I'm sitting there going like this, that ain't the way to handle it. That ain't gonna get it done. And when you get older, you ain't in to futility. You ain't into doing something that pays no dividends. It's gotta show that there's something at the end of the tunnel. You can't just be barking to be barking. You can't just be venting to be venting. It's about getting it done. And are you doing that? That's what we need to ask ourselves. And we're a resolute people, man. We strong, we're special. God made us, we're one of a kind. But at the same time, sometimes that friction, that stress gets to us to the point where all other voices here, all other people here is noise coming from us. They hear problems all the time. It's not solutions. And it's just the approach in corporate America, and I learned this a long time ago. Never go to a boss with just your problems. If you don't have solutions, leave the boss alone, because they ain't gonna like you. Because no boss just wants to hear problems.
Accountability is the solution, though, right?
Nope, it's not a solution. Accountability is highlighting the problem and giving you a conduit as to where the solution lies. But it ain't a solution. The solution is the actual act of solving a problem. You have to bring a solution to people. You have to be fixated on that. Because if you don't, nobody's gonna want to hear you. No matter how right you are. Black people ain't wrong. Everything we say, how we've been victimized as a nation of people for decades, if not centuries, is right. We are not wrong. The problem is that how are you gonna tell somebody who's white, hypothetically speaking, that was born in 1970, that they responsible for slavery? How are you gonna do that? Listen, how are you going to do that? How do you expect that white person to listen?
But that's not what the people are saying. That's how they perceive it, though.
I'm not saying that's what they're saying, but your message is all about whether or not it's received. It's not about what you want to say. It's about what you want to be heard. And if you know you're speaking to somebody that ain't gonna hear you, then it should incumbent upon you to speak in a fashion where they will hear you. Mm-hmm. You can't just sit up there and say, this is the way it is, and this is the way it is, and it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. Bam, and that's it. It doesn't work that way. In the field of communication, we are taught, pay attention to your audience. Make sure you know how they hear something. That's how you reach them. Not by you just spewing. It's by talking in a way that makes sure your audience hears you. That is your responsibility as a communicator. And if you don't feel that way, shut the hell up. Mm-hmm. Because that means you're just talking for yourself. You ain't talking to be heard. You talking to vent. No, you're supposed to be talking to be heard. So you gotta think about your audience. You gotta think about how they're gonna receive what you're saying and say, okay, how can I best get this message across to them where they're gonna hear it, inhale it, grasp it, and do the kind of thing they need to do. That's what it's all about. When I talk to young brothers and sisters, that's what I try to tell them. Because I'm 48, I got mine. I'm 49, I'm sorry, I got mine. Things that we need to do as a community. So you do what you can, you pray a lot, you donate money, you donate your time and energy and what have you, and you move on from there. But in the end, it's about being conscientious enough to tell people what they need to hear and tell people what they need to do, not just what they want. Anybody can appease you to get you through the moment. Almost like it says, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. It's about making sure you facilitate somebody drinking, not just taking them to the pond. You got to be about that. And I don't think enough of us are thinking like that. We are God-fearing people, we decent people. Black people are the most special people on this earth as far as I'm concerned. I'm not against anything, but I love my people. But part of that love is being real enough to tell us what we do wrong sometimes. And by the way, I'm not perfect. I do things wrong. I'm not right all the time, but I'm always righteous. I never, ever, ever walk into a situation looking to hurt my own, because I love us too much. And to see us hurting each other sometimes, just because we want to vent, ain't always the way to go. And that's what I'm trying to say. A lot of us, there's a lot of people in our community, far more intelligent, far more accomplished, far more knowledgeable than me, that have so many answers. How come we don't listen to them enough? I gave you a bunch of names earlier. How come we don't listen to them enough? Hell with Stephen A. I'm doing sports, man. I'm trying to handle my business, and I'm trying to bring a perspective that transcends the world of sports when I can. But when I say Joe Madison, and Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, and Mark Lamont Hill, and Karen Hunter, and Mark Thompson, my man Roland Martin. I mean, the list goes on and on. There are so many loving brothers and sisters who are doing so much. They in the trenches fighting for us. We ain't listening.
HoopJab. HoopJab.